Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Tuesday, December the 12th, 2023. Hope you are all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show, and we have got a jam-packed show for each and every single one of you today. Lots to get into, a lot to discuss. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Let me also say thank you to all those that tuned in this morning to our bowl game simulation on YouTube. We did simulate this morning the Texas Bowl between Texas A&M and Oklahoma State, and we're going to be simulating every single SEC bowl game leading up to the games in the final week of December. Again, guys, thank you all so much. If you have not done so, be sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon as well if you're on YouTube to make sure you're made aware of when we go live, when we drop new video content. Also, guys, be sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're checking us out there, guys. And, of course, follow on social media like I mentioned, guys. Tons to discuss and get into, guys. We're going to talk all things transfer portal. Been a lot of movement from the national landscape, of course, in the SEC, especially at the quarterback position. I want to talk about that a little bit. Some of the guys, where they've gone, quarterbacks who are visiting. Of course, we got the news this morning. A.J. Swan is visiting South Carolina, the former Vanderbilt transfer. And, guys, the conundrum that I think these college coaches face in a win-now environment when it comes to quarterback recruiting, signing quarterbacks in the transfer portal. I want to discuss that much more again from the portal as the madness in the transfer portal continues. Also, guys, we continue along with our bowl game previews. On today's show, I'm breaking down, previewing, predicting the Gator Bowl between the Kentucky Wildcats and the Clemson Tigers, guys. I will give you guys my thoughts on that game, my prediction as well as Mark Stoops and Dabo Swinney's teams go at it and do battle in what should be a really, really fun game down in Jacksonville, Florida. And, guys, kicking off the show, we have our good friend Graham Coffey of DawgsCentral.com to talk all things Georgia football as we continue our SEC team season reviews. We'll look back on the 2023 season that was for Georgia, and Graham will give us his thoughts on the upcoming Orange Bowl against the Florida State Seminoles. Also, we'll mix in some men's basketball talk at the end of that conversation, get an idea of what the Dogs may look like this year. And, of course, guys, we'll close out the show with your questions, comments, and voicemails in our daily mailbag segment. I want to hear from you. I want you to be a part of the show, so be sure all throughout the show you're leaving us your questions, comments, voicemails, all that good stuff, and we'll get into all of those in the final 30 minutes or so of the show. Again, guys, thank you all so much for your continued love and support. Really, really excited to be chatting with you all here on this Tuesday. We do have an update, by the way. I mentioned to you all TDC was TBD for tomorrow. Of course, no Daily Crow Thursday or Friday. We'll be out of town. We'll be on the road, hanging out with family, the Christmas season, of course, guys. Tomorrow, though, I have decided we are going to go live. TDC will rock tomorrow. We're going in the morning versus noon to 2. We're going to move it up. We'll go 10 to 12 tomorrow versus noon to 2. And again, we'll have a jam-packed show. Lots to get into. Another SEC team review. We'll break down and preview and predict another bowl game. So again, going to be a lot of fun, guys. 10 to 12 Eastern time tomorrow instead of noon to 2 Eastern. So again, wanted to make that clear. Then Thursday, Friday, no show. And then the following week, we will get after it, resume as normal, noon to 2, which will be a really, really busy week with, of course, us reacting to the SEC schedules that'll drop. Signing day is on the 20th, right? There's still a national signing day, believe it or not, in the midst of the transfer portal madness. So really exciting stuff, guys. So again, keep in mind tomorrow, 10 to 12 instead of noon to 2, and then no show Thursday and Friday. Guys, I see the comments rolling in. Truly appreciate your love, your support. Thank you all so much. Means the absolute world, guys. And appreciate you all rocking with us. In the meantime, guys, like I mentioned, we are kicking the show off in style. Like I told you before, we've been breaking down, we've been reviewing all these different SEC teams looking ahead to bowl games if they have them. And one of the most interesting teams in the SEC, there aren't many programs out there that can go 12-1 and say that they had a disappointing year. But when your expectations are national title or bust, that is the case. And certainly that is the case for the Georgia Bulldogs. And to help us break it all down, our good friend Graham Coffey, DawgsCentral.com. He joins the show. Graham, what's going on, man? I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Good to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, Graham, there's not many programs, not many teams out there that you talk about a 12-1 season. I think 99.9% of the programs in college football are jumping for joy or celebrating that. But when you lose the last one, when you lose the SEC championship and you get left out of the playoff, it is a disappointing year for a team that was trying to do something that we have not seen in, I think, over 100 years or about 100 years, which was 3 straight national championships. Again, 12-1 overall, 8-0 for the Georgia Bulldogs in SEC play, but losing to Bama in that SEC title. Let's first start, Graham, as we look back on the season that was, just the way this Georgia team evolved and grew, starting on the offensive side. I feel like the storyline all year long, and really became the storyline, Carson Beck really shining in his first year at QB1. I feel like almost, Graham, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but from the outside looking in, the expectations for Georgia was so high. It's like they couldn't do enough in the regular season to get any credit, get any respect. All everybody wanted to talk about was the schedule and how bad it was. Carson Beck, it felt like to me quietly, was elite this year. Mike Bobo quietly was one of the best offensive coordinators in college football. The offense was elite. What did you see from Beck and from that Georgia offense starting from game one all the way to the SEC title, the evolution, if you will, from that offense, and again, starting with Beck under center?
Yeah, it was interesting with Carson Beck. I mean, I agree with you. He had a great season. He, ended up turning into, I think, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He came in and, they really kind of kept a tight leash on him early. That South Carolina game, like, lots of underneath stuff. There were times where maybe he had shots downfield that he wasn't seeing. And as a younger player coming up through Georgia's program, the thing that he always wanted to do in scrimmages and practices was throw the deep ball. And he had a little bit of a reputation for trying to force balls into coverage that he shouldn't. And I think that, Mike Bobo really, really drilled him on protecting the football. And once he proved he could do that, which he did over the first month of the season, it was like they put a little more on his plate every week, and he got better and better. And he started, getting to a spot where they were letting him open things up. And he was really, really good throwing the ball up the seams. You saw kind of the boundary shots come into the offense a little bit at times later in the year, but that really wasn't something Georgia did very much. And it felt like that was going to come out maybe down the stretch or in a playoff situation with Ra Thomas. And then you didn't end up seeing him in the SEC championship game. And that'll kind of be, the what if, I guess, for that passing game. But the offense got better all year. Beck got better all year, but the offensive line, they had a lot of returning starters, a lot of guys who had played a lot of football, and they honestly weren't great at times out of the gate, and they struggled with some of their run block schemes. South Carolina did a really good job of shooting gaps against them at times. Like, that game stood out. There were other times early in the season where they just looked a half a step off maybe. And then they got better, and they kind of, played their way into a rhythm. And late in the season, against Ole Miss and some other teams down the stretch, they were opening up these big holes up the middle for Kendall Milton. And that run game kind of got going for them in a way that it hadn't earlier in the year. They got explosive chunks on the ground, and earlier it had just kind of been these 4 to 6 yard stay on schedule type runs. So, yeah, it felt like as you came down the stretch, I remember being at that Ole Miss game, and they had McConkey healthy, and Bowers had just come off the surgery, but he was in the lineup and he was making plays. And I was kind of like, if these two guys keep lining up on the right side of the formation together, and, this offensive line is going to block their zone runs like this, then this team is going to be really, really hard to like keep under 40 points. And had a really good week up at Tennessee. Felt like they kind of had some juggernaut potential on offense. Not like crazy, but good enough. And then in the end, you saw sort of that.
See if we can get Graham back. I think we just lost the feed. There we go. Sorry about that, Graham. Something just happened there. My audience
You're good.
My audience, ironically enough, likes to call that the Muschamp Packers. So it is ironic that anyway. Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. It might have been on my end.
But no, yeah, you mentioned, Graham, the growth of the offensive side of the football. I think what's interesting, 38 points per game, just under 500 yards per game. And like you said, I feel like injuries was a really, really big storyline for Georgia this year with some of their top guys. I mean, even to the SEC championship where you felt like, and, injuries, certainly it's not an excuse we're going to use because Dawg fans didn't want to hear it from Alabama when they talked about a couple years ago when their, starting receivers got hurt or whatever. But realistically, you had a banged up Ladd McConkey, you had a banged up Brock Bowers. And for them to do what they did, a wide cast of characters who made that happen. It really does speak to how impressive it was, the job that Mike Bobo, I think, did, pressing all the right buttons for that offense this year.
Yeah, I mean, like Dylan Bell was a name that I think a lot of people started to hear the last few weeks of the season. He is a second-year wide receiver who was a three-star player out of Houston, and not that many people cared that much that he was signing with Georgia. There wasn't a lot of fanfare over his recruitment. They switched him to running back in fall camp because they were so banged up at running back. And then, in late in the season, he ends up going off having, 100+ yards on the road at Tennessee, like comes in and fills that kind of Z receiver position for McConkey. So they've done a really good job of, I think what I would say is Georgia's done a really, really good job of like establishing an offense where there are 6 to 8 guys that can score a touchdown on you at any time. And you have to account for that as a DC. There are times against like an Alabama where you need to know like who your alpha playmaker is, like who's the number one guy, who's the Xavier Leggett, to use the South Carolina example, that we're going to like throw the ball up to in a 50-50 situation. He's going to make a play right now. And I think Georgia, those alpha guys, like you said, they were a little banged up in that Alabama game, or they didn't play. And it's tough when you come into those games against 2 really, really good teams. Sometimes those are decided by one player making one play, and Georgia just didn't make those plays.
Now, Graham, on the defensive side of the football, you look at the numbers, and I mean, they jump out to you, right? 16 points per game allowed, less than 300 yards per game allowed by that Georgia defense. They were dominant. I thought it got off to a slow start in regards to getting after the quarterback. 29 sacks on the year. I remember that being one of the storylines when South Carolina went to Athens. Dawgs, for whatever reason, against lesser competition, they weren't generating pressure, weren't getting after the QB. I think that's something as the season went on, it took care of itself. They became really, really good in the red zone. Red zone defense became a calling card. Was it the typical dominant Georgia defense that we're used to seeing, or was it a little bit, meet expectations, exceed expectations, fall short? I know in that game against Alabama, obviously, I think Georgia did a really good job of putting the spy on Jalen Milroe, and Milroe made some plays, but, they probably did what Auburn or LSU or some of these other teams should have done, which was spy Jalen Milroe. So thoughts on the Georgia defense this year? Again, was it that typical, elite defense we're used to seeing, or was there something left to be desired?
Yeah, I thought Georgia's defense was good. It wasn't great. It was not that, it was not elite defenses like Georgia had in 2021 or 2019. It was not, the 2022 defense was not as good as 2021, but it was better than this one. Georgia under Kirby Smart has never had, in my memory, as many issues defending the edges in the run game as they did this year. They really struggled to find kind of what they wanted to do at that edge position. there were times where they didn't play with an outside linebacker on the field, which is something that they've basically always done the last few years. Like, they just never really had anybody emerge at that position. You thought it might be Marvin Jones Jr. He was a former 5-star. And he had some nice moments. He's not a bad player or a liability at all, but like you've gone from like Nolan Smith, Azeez Ojulari, all these guys that are in the NFL now playing kind of outside linebacker, edge rush positions, and they just didn't really figure that out this year. And then in the pass game, I think you had a young true freshman or a redshirt freshman corner in Dalen Everett. And he kind of had some struggles early in the season, but he ended up playing really, really well the last month, 6 weeks of the year. Like, that secondary for Georgia was excellent. I think, even against Alabama in that game, they lost. Like, they held Milroe to 13 of 23 passing for 192 yards. They held Bama to 300 something yards, I think, in that game, 306. Like, if you told me that before the game, I would say they're going to win. I think lots of athletes at inside linebacker, the defensive line, didn't really have that dominant force in the middle or on the edges, really. But like, they just kind of had enough athletes on the back seven to paper over some of that. But I think defensive line will be sort of the priority for Georgia in the transfer portal.
Graham, again, when you look back at the 2023 season, I just think it's really interesting because you think about the pressures that Georgia faced. I mean, again, we're talking about a team that this season is going to be labeled as disappointing after 12-1 and 8-0 in SEC play. But you started slow with a 41-point win over UT Martin and a 42-point win over Ball State. And like, again, when you're being held to, the question for Georgia was never, are they an elite team? Are they the best team in college play? It was, are they good enough to win a third straight national title? So when you're being held to that standard, you can't win by enough. And then you come out of the gate slow against South Carolina. I thought we really saw Georgia, though, cut it on in that second half. Quality win against Mizzou. Then you blast Ole Miss on national TV. You blast Tennessee at their place. But I'll ask you this, because again, it comes down to Atlanta. You lose to Alabama, and it feels like it's this Nick Saban mountain that Kirby and Georgia, they maybe thought they had gotten over, and now we're all reminded that Nick Saban still rules college football. So, like, what's the mood of those around the Georgia program, the fan base, just the media, those that cover it, those that follow it every day? Because again, 99.9% of programs will look back and say, hey, we had a great year. We lost a tough one. It is what it is. But I'd have to imagine there is a major level of disappointment right now with the Georgia fan base that I think fully expected to win a third straight national championship.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone sees this like missed opportunity. I think you look at that Alabama game, like we just said, like they held them to 306 yards. Georgia came into that game with the top 10 offense, the better quarterback, the better receiver group. Like there was a lot of things that you thought kind of come into that game. Like Georgia can sort of make Alabama chase them. And if Georgia can get into the 30s, Alabama might not be able to get there with them. And then, you lose Xavier Truss at right tackle early in that game. I think on the second drive, they lost him, and it was like they looked lost for a quarter and a half with their play calling. And they stopped running tempo, and they stopped doing a lot of the things that they did on the first drive and that they ended up doing, the last 20, 25 minutes of that game that made it competitive again. So, yeah, I think that's kind of that'll be the question for Georgia fans is, what would have happened if maybe we kept our foot on the gas a little bit when our right tackle went down. But I don't think disappointment's the right word. Like, you went 40 years without a title, 41 years. And, you wanted that monkey off your back, and it was this agonizing thing. And I remember the reaction to the 2021 Alabama SEC championship loss. And, like, even though Georgia was going to the playoff, like, there was just this level of despondence, like, are we ever going to get over this? Like, I need this out of my life kind of thing. There's not that anymore. But I do think it's a lost opportunity. I think the frustration for Georgia fans on this will always be every other kind of 12-1 team that was number one going into the final weekend and lost its conference championship game to a top 8 CFP ranked team. Like, they got to go on to the college football playoff. Alabama, didn't win its division multiple years and got to go on and play for and win national championships. So this was a unique year in college football with a lot of one-loss teams and a lot of undefeated teams. And I don't think anybody can really make a good argument that Georgia wasn't one of the best 4 teams. But ironically enough, because Alabama lost a game to Texas, in week 2 of the season, it meant that Georgia, de facto lost a game to Texas, I guess, in the eyes of the committee. So I think there's some bitterness over how that process played out. But I think everybody kind of is still on the path of we won 29 in a row. So they're probably going to go back out there and win a lot more games next season.
Graham, that is a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you next. Should the Dawgs have made the college football playoff? It may sound crazy to some, but again, if we are talking, there's no way anybody who knows ball watched the SEC title and walked away saying anything other than these are 2 of the best 4 teams in college football. I know why Georgia didn't make the playoff. I understand why you couldn't put them in, but I'm someone, Graham, admittedly, I'm a huge fan of an expanded playoff outside of 4 teams, whether it was going to be 8, whether it was going to be 12. And it's like this season was the perfect segue into next year. And this is why we need this. Even people who were not for it are like, okay, it's the lesser of the 2 evils. But it sounds like what you're saying, Georgia, you can certainly make a case, and you could even argue they should have been in the Final Four.
Yeah, I don't think there's there's no question in my mind they were one of the 4 best teams. If you look at what they did against other CFP top 25 teams, their yard per play margin, they're lots of different stats, significantly better than anyone in the country. And that kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier. Georgia, at this point, Kirby Smart isn't really interested in the weekly beauty contest against an FCS opponent. It's more about we're going to use these games to get better, and then we're going to look really good against the teams that we think have a chance to beat us. But yeah, Georgia should have been in the playoff, in my opinion. If the mandate was to get 4 best teams, and you're going to screw over 13-0 Florida State in service of doing that, then you should probably get the best 4 teams, and they didn't. No one has explained to me this sort of thing that happened where Texas gets a win over Georgia because they had a win over Alabama. That didn't make too much sense to me. I also didn't understand how Florida State kind of somehow was slotted between Bama and Georgia in that whole process. That felt arbitrary. But I said the night before the playoff rankings were coming out that if you're going to do the 4 best and you're going to leave Florida State out, that you have to put Georgia in, because you're saying that we're doing the 4 best now. And it felt like they kind of married the philosophy of 4 most deserving with 4 best, and did it in a way that was kind of convenient for them, and that was going to create some really, really good ratings on New Year's Day, and shot that out there. And not saying there's an anti-Georgia rating conspiracy, right? Georgia's just had a lot of success, but people are going to be excited to watch the brands that are in the playoff. I have no question about that.
So, Graham, looking ahead to bowl season, my goodness, what in the world? My apologies, Graham.
Sorry,
That was
man.
on me. I have no idea what
No,
happened.
you're good.
No,
Okay.
so Georgia gets rewarded. Take on Florida State, those Seminoles, who I do agree with you. The committee putting FSU ahead of Georgia, and it just goes to show the committee had practically no idea what they were doing, because I think we'd all agree that Georgia's a better team than Florida State. Either way, those two teams will face off. I feel like a lot of people are looking at this game as they're waiting on Georgia to expose the Seminoles as like, this is why they shouldn't have been in. This game, December the 30th, 4 o'clock Eastern time kickoff. Again, what's fascinating about this game is it's a pair of teams and a pair of fan bases that I think you can realistically question if they want to be there. Let's just call it for what it is. And I am going to be picking Georgia in this game because when it comes to master motivators, guys who know how to get their team off the mat and get their team excited to play, I trust that Kirby Smart can do that and will do that. But even for him, Graham, this is going to be a challenge, right? I mean, just because of what these two teams were hoping to accomplish and now, unfortunately what they're left with, which winning the Orange Bowl, Graham, it used to mean something. Now, I don't know how excited these two teams really are to play in this game.
Yeah, I had a colleague at one point in life in the business world who had this saying of like, never waste a disaster. I kind of think like Kirby Smart is really good at never wasting a disaster. Not that a 12-1 season is a disaster, but yeah, like Georgia, I think a loss can be a gift sometimes. And in this case, a loss kept you out of the college football playoff. But like, there's a lot of dudes in that locker room who have not really experienced a loss as like a college starter or as somebody who was on the field participating in a game since they got to Georgia. So I think that there's a good bit of motivation and in an interesting way. I think like the loss to Alabama is probably going to lead to some guys coming back that maybe wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, Kirby, Georgia went and they played Texas in the 2018 Sugar Bowl, and it was after an SEC championship game loss to Alabama, and they just didn't show up. And there was a bunch of guys that were like on the trip that didn't want to be there or, came down and didn't play and were going pro. And like after that loss, Kirby kind of, I think, changed his approach to these non-CFP bowl games and was like, okay, like if you're getting on the bus, you better be all in and you better be mentally there. And we're not going to bring guys down there for a vacation. Like we're coming to win a football game. And I expect Georgia to show up and come correctly for that game. Like they will be motivated. I think the thing that will probably weigh into this game more than some are thinking about is just that, like, if Florida State wins this game, they're going to claim a national title. And if you're Georgia, like, you don't want to be the team that gets a title claimed on them, right? Like, you don't want to be 2017 Auburn out here, letting the world have to see a UCF title banner get hung up on Twitter. So I think that Georgia will come down there and they'll probably have guys play that will surprise some people, and I think that they'll play better than people might think.
Now, Graham, looking way too far ahead, obviously Wednesday night we get the 2024 SEC schedule, but I'm pretty sure Georgia's is completely leaked. Yeah, I think Georgia's has been leaked, actually. So we'll get the rest of the schedules. But 2023, folks looked at the schedule and laughed and mocked it. I know, Georgia fans, Georgia beat writers, everybody had to hear that for months and months. Nobody's going to be saying that about the 2024 schedule. Your early thoughts and impressions on it: at Alabama, at Texas in the regular season. If the Dogs go 12-0 and 8-0 again, safe to say it is going to be earned.
Yeah, I think they'll make it to the playoff if they go 12-0 next year.
Yeah.
Hot take for you on the Spurs Up show.
Yeah.
No, I think it's an awesome schedule. Like, I'm really pumped about it as somebody that covers Georgia and that, has followed Georgia for most of my life. Like, I love a schedule where you get to go on the road to Austin. That's a great college football road trip. Ditto for Oxford. And you get a game at Alabama. Like, you have a lot of opportunities to make a statement, and you have a lot of opportunities, truthfully, to like lose a game in it not really matter. Lose a couple games even. I'm not saying Georgia will, but like they can in this 12-team format. Like if they go 10-2 with that schedule, they're probably still going to the playoff. I'll say that they are, like that schedule is a murderer's row. I am very, very pumped about seeing, kind of how they respond to that. You start the season with Clemson in Atlanta, which like on top of all this other stuff, that's a physical football team that, still plays kind of a line of scrimmage brand of football that can beat you up. So I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of helmet games. It's going to be a lot of marquee matchups. I am curious to see if there's any like level of load management kind of that comes into play, just because you are going to want your best players for these big games. But man, like I just don't know if Carson Beck comes back. Like I don't know if I'm trotting him out there for more than a series or two against Tennessee Tech or whoever it is they've got. That's kind of their FCS opponent.
Graham, switching gears before we get you out of here, basketball season has begun. What's the outlook on the Dawgs this year? I know this is a program that's obviously building. All the focus right now is on football, but what's your outlook? Do you think Georgia can make some noise in the SEC this year on the hardwood?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of like positive vibes around Georgia basketball right now. Tom Crean, that experiment was kind of tough. I mean, his last season, they won 6 games total, not in the SEC. They won 6 games the entire year. And there was just a lot of like people that were checked out, and there wasn't much investment, I think, in the program at that point. And yeah, like Mike White came on board, did some good things his first season, and then he's had an infusion of talent. Like he brought a lot of good players in through the portal. And then he's got a couple true freshmen that are difference makers. They got a kid, Silas Demery Jr., who was a USC recruit that they flipped late in the cycle. And he is going to be he's their starting point guard basically. And he's already, having some games where he's putting up double doubles. They've got a young shooter behind the 3-point line. Like they've got some pieces they haven't had in the past. They have a 7-foot center that's a transfer, but like he can give you 10 on a good night, and he can protect the rim in a way that they couldn't in past years. So I'm not sure exactly, it's tough. Like Georgia kind of has a history of having a good non-conference season in basketball and then struggling when they get to SEC play. I think this team's a little deeper than some of those, but like I expect them to, make some noise, be competitive in the SEC. They blew out Georgia Tech the other night after they had beaten Duke. They beat Florida State on the road. They've played Oregon, they've played Miami, and kept those games within 10. So like they're doing some good things, but the grind of an SEC schedule is, I think, tougher than a lot of people realize for basketball. So it'll be interesting to see like if they can get to a 500 record in the league or maybe a little above that, and have a shot maybe to be on the bubble or, within range when you get to championship tournament weekend.
Graham Coffey of DawgsCentral.com, the co-founder of Dawgs Central, does a fantastic job talking all things Georgia Bulldogs. Graham, let folks know where they can find your work. Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at DawgsCentral.com or find me on Twitter at Graham Coffey, DC. Coffee is spelled with a Y, and on YouTube, Dawgs Central as well. So if you type in Dawgs Central, you'll get to me one way or another. Graham, you're the man. I appreciate you taking the time. Keep up the great work, and we'll definitely do this again soon. Absolutely, man. Big fan of what you do, and appreciate you having me on the show. Yeah, man. Appreciate you. Take care. Great stuff, guys. Graham Coffey of DawgsCentral.com, breaking down all things Georgia and, of course, the upcoming Orange Bowl. Be sure to check them out. Follow them, guys. Apologize for the technical issues. I'm not sure if that was him or that was us, but either way, we're good. We rock. We roll. We persevere. It makes no matter to us. Guys, we're going to jump into our first break of the day. On the other side, quarterback movement is happening in the transfer portal. I'll give my thoughts on the latest commitments, the latest visits, and the conundrum that these college coaches face when it comes to recruiting the quarterback position. Guys, all that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home. Call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, December the 12th, 2023. I want to say thank you yet again to our good friend Graham Coffey of DawgsCentral.com for taking the time to chat with us in our Georgia season review and look ahead to the Orange Bowl against Florida State. Guys, we'll continue that tomorrow. Our good friend Billy Derrick of VandySports.com will join us to talk all things Vanderbilt football in 2023 and a long offseason that awaits Clark Lee and the Commodores. So again, thank you so much to Graham Coffey. Guys, thank you all for tuning in here on this Tuesday. Like I mentioned, we've still got a ton to get into. We're going to break down the Gator Bowl later in the show between Kentucky and Clemson. And of course, I want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your voicemails, and our daily mailbag segment. But guys, in the meantime, there's been a lot of movement in the transfer portal lately, specifically at the quarterback position. And when you talk about the portal, guys, of course, in football, the quarterback position, that is what moves the needle, right? Because it's the most important position on the field. And while it's nice to pick up this wide receiver here or that tight end or this defensive back, it is these quarterbacks. There's a reason they are getting the game-changing money. They're getting money in the seven figures. A good starting quarterback, right, as Matt Rule over at Nebraska talked about. Good starting quarterback cost you $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. I want to talk the latest quarterback movement because there's been a ton over the last 24, 48-plus hours or so. We've seen Riley Leonard go from Duke to Notre Dame. He actually made that commitment public this morning. I think picking up a really quality, valuable NFL caliber QB1. Of course, they had Sam Hartman this past year for the second consecutive year. Notre Dame is going to the ACC, I think showing kind of what they can do with their brand, with their NIL opportunities, and getting a really high-quality signal caller. Again, a next-level NFL caliber signal caller in Riley Leonard coming from Duke. Also, Arkansas, Bobby Petrino, he's gotten his QB1. Taylon Green coming over from Boise State. I think what's interesting, guys, about Taylon Green, you look at his measurables, 6'6", 221 pounds. This guy's basically KJ Jefferson 2.0, and I think this all but guarantees that KJ Jefferson, as John Neighbors, our good friend over at Locked On Razorbacks, expects, and as our friend Brad Crawford dropped over a week ago, although KJ Jefferson has not entered the portal yet, we do fully expect him to enter the transfer portal. So Bobby Petrino gets Taylon Green from Boise State. We, of course, already knew that Dylan Gabriel, the Oklahoma transfer, he is now an Oregon Duck. Brock Vandegrift, the Georgia transfer, he is a Kentucky Wildcat. You've then got guys, Kyle McCord, the former Ohio State quarterback, visiting Nebraska. You've got Will Rogers, the former Mississippi State quarterback, visiting Washington. It's interesting, too, going back to Nebraska. Matt Rule made it very clear, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. I just wonder, how much is Kyle McCord asking for from those guys? Also, guys, you've got A.J. Swan, the former Vanderbilt signal caller, visiting South Carolina. And it brings me to this, guys, and this is something that I've talked about before, because every situation is different, right? There's some situations where, I think it's very obvious what you want to do, right? If you can go out in the transfer portal market and you can land a quarterback, and I think, too, it depends on the coach, right? I think there's differing philosophies. There's different philosophies for how coaches want to approach the transfer portal. Heck, there's some that don't even embrace the transfer portal. If you're a Dabo Sweeney or you're one of these other coaches out there, you'd much rather, recruit from the high school ranks and develop and build your program that way. There's some out there that are portal kings, right? We've seen Ole Miss continue to crush the portal. Heck, Kentucky just got Brock Vandegrift, and they got a transfer running back from Ohio State. We've seen Florida State crush the transfer portal. So it goes school by school, coach by coach, the philosophy of how they want to attack the transfer portal. But what I think is interesting, guys, is this. I think we would all agree that the portal has created an environment in which coaches are in a win now world, right? And I'm not talking you got to win big in year one or even year two. But how many coaches are getting 5 years to build a program? How many coaches are getting more than 5 years? I would say virtually none. Very few, depending on the program, are getting 5. Most are getting to year 3, maybe year 4 to show the real signs of progress that the fan base and the program respectively wants to see. And again, each situation is different. But I think it's fascinating. You look at a place like a South Carolina, for example, and this A.J. Swan news comes out, right? He is visiting South Carolina. He is on campus today. He may be there as we speak. And you're going to get a mixed bag or a mixed reaction from folks of, I think there will be some that they're all for competition. May the best man win. They don't care who the starting quarterback is. They just want to see their favorite team win games. Again, this could be happening at Washington. This could be happening at Nebraska. This is happening all over the place. But there's going to be some that say, hey, competition's great. Iron sharpens iron. Let's bring in all the quality players we can. Then there's going to be some people who say, absolutely not. We have our guy in this young prized freshman, right? This true freshman that we're really, really high on that, maybe he's appeared in some game action. Maybe he hasn't. But it's just, we're kind of in an interesting place right now when it comes to recruiting that position specifically, right? Because multiple guys can play wide receiver and do play wide receiver. Multiple guys play running back. Multiple guys play tight end. Multiple guys play on defense. Quarterback is the one position where you have one guy. You have one QB1 typically. There are very few teams out there, if any, that are successful that are running 2 quarterback or 3 quarterback systems. You have your QB1 and then you have your backup, right? So it's a much different vibe. It's a much different feeling on picking up players out of the portal. And so we evaluate this situation at South Carolina, for example, where there is a large portion of the fan base, and we've talked about this before, guys. There's a large portion of the South Carolina fan base that has gone ahead and put all of their stock in. They've put all of their eggs in the Lenoris Sellers basket, and they are riding with Lenoris Sellers 2024 and beyond. Hey, this is his football team. The Lenoris Sellers era has officially begun, and they will tell you and vouch to you. I had a guy this morning tell me that Lenoris Sellers has the skill set of Cam Newton and Hendon Hooker. And guys, I understand what he was trying to say, right? In regards to, okay, he's a dual threat player. He can throw the football. He's also a big body, big physical kid. But there are fans in the South Carolina fan base that are already comparing Lenoris Sellers to guys like Cam Newton and Hendon Hooker because of one throw against Furman and one run against Vanderbilt, right? But South Carolina in the market for a quarterback. A.J. Swan visiting. Heck, I was asked yesterday, Chris, should South Carolina add a quarterback in the transfer portal? And guys, I'm not saying they should go out and get someone that is going to come in and take over as QB1. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But right now in Columbia, the quarterback room is as follows going into 2024. Lenoris Sellers and Dante Reno. Luke Doty is a wide receiver in my eyes. Luke Doty, in my mind, is a wide receiver. So you've got those two guys. Maybe if you want to throw Luke Doty in, sure. But still, that does not inspire a lot of confidence when you talk about a true competition at the position. Iron sharpening iron. Lenoris Sellers having to win the job. Guys, I think South Carolina, they should pick up a quarterback. I think you could vouch for picking up 2. I think picking up 2 quarterbacks in that room to, in the spirit of competition, say, hey, may the best man win. The problem you also run into, though, is how many guys in the transfer portal want to come into a situation where they're not going to be the starter. A lot of guys are leaving for opportunities to play. You're going to have a hard time selling that bag of goods to someone that, hey, by the way, we've got this young freshman we're really high on. No guarantees you're going to play. You may just come here just to sit behind somebody. But You look at what Ole Miss did last year in the transfer portal. They had Jackson Dart coming back. They added Spencer Sanders. They added Walker Howard. They said, hey, in the spirit of competition, may the best man win. And all it did was make Jackson Dart better. Iron sharpened iron. And look what happened, guys. Ole Miss went 10-2, and he had the best season of his career. Now, obviously, I am much closer to South Carolina and know a lot more about South Carolina's quarterback room than I do, say, Kentucky's or Nebraska's or Washington's. But what I think is so interesting is that even after Lenora Sellers tore up the Furman defense and had a nice run against Vandy, anybody from the outside looking in would say that South Carolina would be crazy not to add a quality starting quarterback like a KJ Jefferson. Heck, like an AJ Swan, because they want to hitch their wagon to some true freshman who, let's face it, is unproven. I mean, are Washington fans saying the same thing? Are Nebraska fans saying the same thing? How about Oregon? How about Arkansas? How about Notre Dame? How about Kentucky? And this is what I'm talking about, guys, this conundrum that college coaches face now in a win-now world. Because ideally, you would love to, and again, this is not a South Carolina thing. Let me make that very clear. This is a college football thing. Doesn't matter the school. You got this young hotshot 4 or 5-star guy, and you're really high on, you think it could be the future. Here's the problem, though, especially when you start getting into year 3, year 4, God forbid, of your tenure. Let's say you're Florida and you got DJ Lagway if Graham Mertz didn't come back or whatever it is. Like, once you start getting deeper into your tenure, right, you don't have forever to get it rolling. And when you're going especially into what people would label as a critical year 3 if you're Billy Napier, a critical year 4 if you're Shane Beamer, a critical year 5 if you're Sam Pittman. Guys, you don't really have the wiggle room to roll the dice with an unproven true freshman and say, hey, go take on this SEC slate. And if we miss a bowl game, God forbid, we can turn to the fan base and turn to everybody and say, well, I mean, we were playing a young quarterback. Just give us time. Please be patient. You and I both know college football fans have no patience. They're like bad doctors. They have no patience. So I think the conundrum that college coaches are facing right now in this win-now world of college football is this. Do I hand the keys to a true freshman that I'm really high on, and we may believe he's got all the upside in the world? Do I hand the keys to a young, unproven dude, or if I have the opportunity, do I go out into the portal and sign a proven commodity at the Power 5 level? I'm not saying he's elite, but he's a dude that has at least played college football. Maybe he's played SEC football. Maybe he's been a starter before. And I operate that way. I think it is a fascinating argument because I'm not sure there's one answer right or wrong, and you just can't completely ditch quarterback recruiting at the high school level. I mean, you're setting a really, really bad precedent. But, guys, we're seeing it in college football in the playoff. We're seeing a lot of the most successful teams, guys, their quarterbacks are coming from the portal. A lot of the best teams in college football, guys, they are portal-driven teams with transfer portal quarterbacks. I'm not saying that's everyone. I'm certainly not saying that is everyone, but we are seeing it more and more and more. And again, in this win-now world of college football, let's say you're Billy Napier going into year 3, you're Shane Beamer going into year 4, you're Sam Pittman going into year 5, whatever it is, whatever your situation, where you know that you better win and you better win now. How each of these coaches decides to operate is fascinating. How they decide to operate is fascinating because, again, do you hitch your wagon to an unproven freshman, or do you go out and get a more proven commodity in the transfer portal, but maybe in the long term, the payoff isn't as great? How do you balance? program. God, son of a Sorry about that, guys. Developing a program behind closed doors, developing guys that you have signed through recruiting. I think it's a really, really interesting conundrum that college coaches face. And again, we're seeing teams be very, very active in the portal. But if we were looking at any other situation that was not South Carolina, maybe Arkansas fans are high on a youngster. Maybe Florida fans are high. Maybe Nebraska fans are high on a youngster. But if you have the opportunity to sign a proven commodity at the collegiate level at the quarterback position, do you really turn that down to hitch your wagon to an unproven freshman? Especially in this win-now world of college football, and especially if you're a head coach who's going into a pivotal year of your tenure. What do you do? Side with the freshman or go out in the portal and find a proven commodity? Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling, guys. Kentucky and Clemson face off in the Gator Bowl. We're going to break down the game, preview the game, and I'll give you guys my prediction for who I think wins between the Tigers and the Wildcats. Guys, all that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
So Dougie, hello Dougie,
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, December the 12th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Do not forget, end of show, last 30 minutes or so, we will take your questions, your comments, your voicemails as well at 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. I want to hear from you guys, your full thoughts on everything. The transfer portal bowl season upcoming. Lot to discuss right now. And in the meantime, guys, we continue our bowl game previews. We're talking Gator Bowl down in Jacksonville, Florida at TIAA Bank Field as the Kentucky Wildcats and the Clemson Tigers will do battle December the 29th, a noon kickoff on ESPN. Clemson right now, guys, a 5.5-point favorite in this game. The over-under is set at 47.5. Obviously, these are two opponents that Gamecock fans are very, very familiar with, as the Gamecocks played Kentucky in the second to last week of the season and, of course, closed out the regular season with the Clemson Tigers. So I'm sure Kentucky and Clemson will both be watching a lot of that film as they break down each other, study each other, what have you. And as we look at this game, guys, the top storylines, I think what you first have to look at, again, transfer portal, NFL draft is affecting all of these teams in college football and throughout bowl season. Can the Cats move the football without their top playmaker in this game? In case you missed it, there will be no Ray Davis, as he has declared for the NFL draft. He is out for the ball game. What is Kentucky able to do offensively? Because the offense really ran through him, right? They do have Demi Sumo Karngbae back behind him as well. They've got more of a stable of backs than just Ray Davis. But make no mistake, Ray Davis was the bell cow for them. He was by far the most productive back. And I think it's going to put a lot more pressure on Devin Leary and that group of wide receivers to make big plays through the passing game. So again, without Ray Davis toting the rock, without Ray Davis being the bell cow for the Wildcats, we saw him so many times pop off and in that final game against Louisville, we saw him against Florida, of course, earlier in the season. He was truly the dude that made this thing go and carried an offense that otherwise was not great, right? Because Devin Leary, I think we'd all agree, fell short of expectations this season. How is Kentucky able to move the football without Ray Davis, as he has declared for the NFL draft? Guys, on the flip side, stick him with the transfer portal. How do defensive departures affect the Clemson Tigers? Of course, Andrew Makuba, he is gone. Toriano Pride has committed to Missouri. They are gone from the secondary. So I mentioned Devin Leary. I mentioned Berrien Brown, Dane Key, that group of wide receivers. Does this all of a sudden open up things for Kentucky in the passing game, right? I think, make no mistake, these are a pair of teams that are suspect on the offensive side. They are really, really good on the defensive side. This could be a bit of a slugfest, but because of some opt-outs, maybe Clemson isn't quite what they were end of season when it comes to the defensive side of the football. Obviously, that front seven is still elite. We now know Barrett Carter at the linebacker position. He is coming back for Clemson, so I think it's safe to assume that he will play in this game. But again, how do portal departures for both Kentucky and Clemson, how do they affect the outcome of this ball game? Ray Davis for the Cats, and then Makuba and Pride in the secondary for the Tigers. Guys, this is potentially one last ride for Devin Leary, Kentucky quarterback, and also Clemson should be very familiar with him, of course, as Devin Leary played for NC State. I'm pretty sure back in 2021, he was the quarterback that beat Clemson in Raleigh. But Devin Leary, I believe he'll have to apply with the NCAA to get another year of eligibility. I'm not sure he'll get that. So this could be the last time we see Devin Leary in a collegiate game. And I think Kentucky's expecting that, obviously, signing Brock Vandagriff out of the transfer portal. So what does Devin Leary have in store after what was a really lackluster, I thought, guys, regular season. Close it out in style, though, in that game against Louisville. Made some big throws in that ball game. What does he have in his final game as Kentucky quarterback and as a collegiate quarterback as a whole? Guys, we're talking passing games. Again, what can Barryon Brown, Dane Key, what can they do against a short-handed Tiger secondary? What can Clemson do? Can Clemson get anything out of their passing game? Cade Klubnik, I mean, that, you look back at the last game against South Carolina. They certainly did not win that game because of the offensive side of the football. We know, guys, it's Will Shipley, Phil Maffa. They want to run the football. It's an old school feel in the offense, Garrett Riley and company and what they do. What can you realistically get out of Cade Klubnik? I mean, again, they're facing a Kentucky defense that was pretty solid this year, pretty solid against the pass. I think there should be some opportunities there, but I mean, it's now Bo Collins is gone, obviously, and I know that Tiger fans will say, well, he wasn't the top target anyways, but still, to be shorthanded at wide receiver, Cade Klubnik, who's been very, very hit or miss all year long, I just don't know realistically what you can expect. I think Clemson will once again have to lean on the running game of Will Shipley, Phil Maffa, ground and pound, and it's just about not asking Cade Klubnik to do too much. The thing is just tell Cade Klubnik, just don't lose the ball game. You don't have to be a superhero. I don't even know if he's got that capability. Just don't lose the ball game. That's what Garrett Riley and Dabo Swinney, I'd imagine, are asking him in this game. Guys, does special teams play a role in the game? I think it's really interesting. Clemson, although the special teams was really, really good in that game against South Carolina, they've struggled to kick field goals. Kentucky's had their own special team struggles. You just wonder in a game like this, very evenly matched. Again, Clemson just a 5.5-point favorite. What do you get out of special teams? Is that something that could rear its ugly head or could rear its head in this game, depending on the way you look at it, whether you're a Kentucky or a Clemson fan? Finally, guys, I look at this game like, which Kentucky team shows up? Kentucky was one of those teams. Clemson as well, right? I think you could actually say this about both teams. Neither one of these teams met expectations this season, right? On the Kentucky side, they didn't miss it by a lot, but I think more so it was like the eye test. The way Kentucky looked this season, I just don't think anybody would argue that Kentucky met expectations in any sort of way. And it really started, guys, on the offensive side, right? Devin Leary, the passing attack, it just never lived up to expectation. It never was what we thought it was going to be. And then, of course, Clemson, guys. I mean, if you'd have told Clemson fans 8-4 before the regular season, I think they would have told you that you were crazy. Clemson, though, in the last 4 or 5 games or so, really turned it on, really cut it on since that Notre Dame game a couple weeks back. So which version of these teams do we get after the long layoff? What's the motivation factor of each team? I don't think motivation factor should play much of a role in this game or nearly as much as some others, because whether you're Kentucky or Clemson, you're disappointed in how your regular season went, and you're wanting to take some sort of momentum into your offseason. So I think both these teams are fired up, ready to go. But Kentucky, we saw them really struggle down the stretch. Then they beat Louisville. And then Clemson, they were hot and cold. Offensively, they were bad, but won 4 in a row to close it out. So what version of these teams do we get after the long layoffs for each respective group? Now, that brings me into my prediction for this game. Again, guys, Clemson, a 5.5-point favorite, the over-under at 47.5, guys. This is going to be, in my opinion, a defensive slugfest. I mean, you saw these teams at the end of this season could not move the football. I know what Kentucky did against Louisville, but now you have no Ray Davis and Devin Leary against a really, really good front seven. There will be more opportunities to throw the football down the field. Absolutely, there is no question with the players that Clemson is missing. Can Devin Leary take advantage of it? Can Barryon Brown, Dane Key, can that group of weapons, can they get enough out of their running game with Demi Sumo and the rest of that running back room, right? I mean, they've got other capable bodies for sure. But when you lose a guy like Ray Davis, over 1,000 yards rushing this year, 13 touchdowns to his credit, you've got the Raymond Jefferson kid, you've got Demi Sumo Karngbae. But I don't know. I mean, again, you're talking about Jefferson and Caring Bay, 175 rushing yards and 139 rushing yards, respectfully. One total touchdown between the two of these guys. Like, you are losing a massive piece of your offense. And then on the Clemson side, I mean, guys, we all saw here what the Gamecock defense did to them in that final game of the season. Cade Klubnik, do you trust him at all to have any sort of productive outing, right? They're going to lean on Shipley. They're going to lean on Maffa. They don't have a lot of weapons on the outside. I think this is going to be damn near a boring game, a slugfest game, a defensive game. But when it comes to making a pick, I just can't trust Kentucky against that Clemson defense, which is still one of the best in college football, the front seven especially. I just don't see how Kentucky's going to move the football. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think it's going to be a sloppy game. If you love run game and defense, this is the game for you. I think Clemson's got a little bit more than Kentucky in that department. I think they will outlast the Wildcats. And again, a really low-scoring, sloppy type of ball game that is going to set offensive football back years and years. I do think Clemson comes out on top, and I think they win the Gator Bowl. Guys, lock me in. Give me Tigers 20, Kentucky 13. In a game that, again, no Ray Davis equals no win for the Wildcats. I simply don't see it, guys. I don't see how Kentucky is going to overcome that loss, not having him. Do not be surprised. I could see Clemson getting a defensive score or something that's not an offensive score. It's going to be low scoring. It's going to be a slugfest. But I do like Clemson to not only win, but cover. And I love the under in this game, guys. I think the Clemson Tigers will take down Kentucky again, final score of 20-13. Guys, we're going to jump into another quick break. On the other side, our daily mailbag segment begins. And I want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your voicemails, your reactions to everything taking place right now, guys. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, December the 12th, 2023. Now begins our daily mailbag segment. I want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your voicemails. Guys, do not forget, tomorrow we are moving things up 10 to 12 instead of noon to 2. After that, no show Thursday or Friday. And again, guys, just stay tuned for the future schedule. I mean, I think the plan, I believe the plan, going into the next week is going to be to go normal Monday through Friday, noon to 2. But guys, you never know. If things slow down, we get closer to Christmas, not as much going on. There is a chance that maybe we could take the next Thursday, Friday off and begin the holiday season and begin Christmas, right? So just stay tuned, roll with the punches. I know you guys will. In the meantime, though, I want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your voicemails here on this Tuesday. We got a text here on the text line. And guys, you can text the number you see, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Barnyard Pimp out of North Augusta. Shout out to the NA. He texts in, says, tell Beamer to fix the lines of scrimmage via the portal or coaching. Barnyard Pimp, I'll be sure to tell Shane Beamer you said that. Certainly, that's something they got to fix. Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, guys. Let's see. Let's go back to earlier in the show and get through your questions. Let's see. Bird Toffley says, sucks that South Carolina's not going to play Georgia next year. Always enjoy that one, win or lose. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. The border rivalry, it's unsure. Or it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that game is not happening anymore. Bird Toffley says, I don't watch much football out of the SEC, but I'd pick Georgia over Washington and Michigan. I even thought they would beat Alabama. I thought Georgia'd beat Bama too, man. And again, if you're talking four best, Georgia, I mean, listen, Georgia's one of the four best teams in the country. I mean, we all can agree. Like, we know why Georgia didn't make it in. You couldn't put them in, but they're one of the best four teams. Georgia would smoke Washington. I will say that confidently. I say that confidently. So let's see. A lot of trash talking going on in the comments. Coach Ford says, South Carolina's got one quarterback, two running backs, three receivers, and one tight end. Harbor is experienced as any of these players. Enough said. I mean, Coach Ford, listen, to your point, it's a scary reality, man. It's a scary reality. I think you have to allow things to play out in the portal and see where you are roster-wise, right? You got to let things play out in the portal. But, I mean, and Travi's going to love this, right? Because Travi says South Carolina's been young since 1896. But, I mean, I hate to tell you, you're going to be young next year. Like you are, especially on the offensive side. You are going to be young. No question. Let's see what happens at running back. Maybe you get Rocket Sanders. That'd be big. But you're going to be young. So, and going up against that schedule with a young team, that's asking a lot. That is asking a lot. So, let's see. to the TDC Questions channel. Greg Bedinger in our Discord says, certainly not too much going on when you don't have a bowl game to get ready for. Well, Greg, that's why we've been breaking down other SEC team bowl games. Not that we wouldn't be doing that either way, but you are right, Greg. You realize how much dead time there is when there's no bowl game, there's no practices, there's no nothing. Greg Bedinger, what time's the show tomorrow? 10 to 12 a.m. Eastern time. We will go in the morning, 10 to 12 a.m. Eastern. Let's see. Babes and Waves. Any coaching changes coming up? Babes and Waves. I think that's something that won't happen till after the first of the year, if there are going to be coaching changes. I would be stunned if there aren't any changes, but I think that's going to wait until after the first of the year. These coaches are under contract till end of month, and then there is zero buyout to make moves on them. Babes and Waves, which bowl games are you most excited about? I'm excited for the SEC bowl games. I'm fascinated by Georgia, Florida State. I mean, obviously, Babes and Waves, the college football playoff, right? I mean, Bama, Michigan, how can you not be pumped about that one? Texas and Washington. I mean, those are givens. Again, Georgia FSU is fascinating. I am curious about what Kentucky Clemson's going to look like. Ole Miss Penn State, I think, is a really, really fun game. Who else? Missouri, Ohio State. That's probably the one right there. That's probably number one. So Mizzou, Ohio State is going to be a lot of fun. Coach Ford says Beamer will not make any major changes. Well, Coach Ford, I when they get a new defensive coordinator, I think then we can maybe disagree. We'll see. Maybe he doesn't. We shall see. Billy Cotton, our center sucked this year, and yet he transfers. What does that tell you? Billy Cotton, who transferred? Did Nick Gargiulo transfer? I don't think that happened. Unless I missed something. Guys, 843-790-3377. You can call that number. You can text that number. Big pickup today for Oklahoma, by the way. Deion Burks, Purdue transfer wide receiver. He earned second team all Big Ten this past season. Has committed to Oklahoma. Big time pickup for the Sooners for sure. Let's see. Anyways, guys, would love to hear from you. Let's see. Barnyard Pimp. Who was the starting center? I mean, I know Gargiulo played a lot of center. He had a lot of those bad snaps that the person commenting earlier was talking about. So who are you talking about? Again, guys, dudes moved around everywhere. Vershawn Lee played some center. Gargiulo played a lot of center. So I think we're not on the same page. Coach Ford, Facebook will not allow us to connect. That's strange. Facebook should be good to go, I think. I don't know, guys. Technology's great until it isn't. So that's why I always suggest YouTube. Austin Miller. Mario has Southern Cal in his top three, same place our RB1 went last year. I don't think it's a coincidence. Austin, let me tell you this, man. From what I've heard, Oklahoma nor Southern Cal have offered Mario Anderson. Mario Anderson, I think, is putting those on his top four is wishful thinking. But right now, it sounds like Mario Anderson is going to end up at Memphis. So take it for what it's worth. That's what the latest is on the rumor mill. So, Coach Ford, when you have the Oklahoma folks on the show, we need to have it open a Q&A for what to do, see, where to stay, etc. Coach Ford, we will have them on soon. We'll certainly have them on, Coach Ford, before the game next year to get you kind of an itinerary of where to go. Texter says, it's Robbie Davis. My prediction for the playoff, it's going to be Alabama and Texas for the national title game. I'm leaving today to go to Roebuck, South Carolina for the staff Christmas party for Zaxby's. Hope you're having a great day. How about that, Robbie Davis? Love to hear it, Robbie. Enjoy yourself. Have a lot of fun. Brewer Nation says Clayton White isn't going anywhere. Brewer Nation, he may not. I don't know. I mean, I did see that Clayton White and Torian Gray and Sterling Lucas are on the road up in Washington, D.C. to recruit with Shane Beamer. And listen, I'll say this. I understand they're under contract. They better be recruiting, all that good stuff. It does seem weird to me to bring guys on a recruiting trip that you don't have to bring. You know what I mean? That you don't have to bring. That if you're planning on firing them recruiting kids, knowing they won't be on the staff, I don't know. I don't know. Barnyard Pimp. I hate to tell you this, man. Barnyard Pimp, there is 0% chance they are firing the offensive line coach. Zero. Lonnie Teasley is your offensive line coach. And J.C. Sherbert's talked about this on our airways, but the way they're recruiting, they're not firing Lonnie Teasley solely because of that. They are not firing Lonnie Teasley. So, Brewer Nation says those last few games saved Clayton White, even though the competition wasn't great. You might be right. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man. Ethan K., Beamer's slogan for 2024, find some wins. Find some wins. Indeed. There won't be a lot of joy otherwise. Won't be a lot of joy otherwise. Angel the Textbook says Lonnie Teasley deserves to be on the hot seat, but he's recruited very, very well. John Edward is finally out of a timeout. John Edward got put in time. Who knew? Interesting. Let's see. Guys, we're taking your questions, comments, voicemails, 843-790-3377. That is 843-790-3377. Greg Bedinger says, curious, do you know this year's stats for Jaheim Bell and Marshawn Lloyd? Lloyd's were pretty solid, I think. I think Jaheim Bell, I think his stats actually, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, Greg. I don't have it. I don't have them up right now. So I do not have them up right now. Again, guys, I want to say thank you so much to Graham Coffey of DawgsCentral.com for taking the time to chat with us. Guys, what was your reaction to A.J. Swan? The news that A.J. Swan is taking a visit today. Any reaction? Any thoughts to that? Ruben Nation says Lonnie Teasley isn't the problem. Injuries and lack of talent after starters weren't great. Cody says, why would you take Clayton White on recruiting trips to meet players who he isn't going to coach? Doesn't look like Clayton White is going anywhere, at least for another year. Coach Ford says if Beamer can hold on to the staff this year, then cut them loose next year. He can buy a few more years from the Give It Time crew. You know, it's so funny, man. I went on Mark Ryan's show, of course, yesterday. Went on the Fan Upstate. And the amount of people, guys, I think it's just interesting. The amount of people who get upset about the conversations. Like, I'm not in any way, shape, or form calling for Shane Beamer's job. I'm not doing it. I don't want to do it, guys. I've been the fire the coach guy. It's no fun. I don't really want to do it, to be honest with you. But, you know, people are like, oh, you shouldn't talk about him, his seat being warm. You should, like, when is the right time to apply pressure then? Humor me. Like, how long do you give it? 10 years? I mean, do you give it 10 years? Do you give it 8 years? I think Shane Beamer is going to get till 2025 at minimum. But at what point do you start holding the program to a standard? That'd be the only question I ask. Because I was asked about what does Beamer need to do to come back in 2025? What does he need to do in 2025 to come back beyond that? I mean, it's not the most fun convo to have, but I mean, I think we'd all agree that South Carolina needs to get back to a bowl game. That is the minimum goal and expectation. No matter who the quarterback is next year, they've got to get back to a bowl game, man. I think 5-7. Shane Beamer, I think, is still back. Guys, I think 4-8 in 2024 are worse, and I think all bets are off the table. I'm not saying they'd fire him. I'm not even saying they should, but I think all bets are off at that point. I just know, I've said it so many times, no coach is immune to the effects of losing. No coach is immune to the effects of it. No, so I don't care. Like, there will be no excuse. If you go 4-8, there will be no excuse good enough. No excuse good enough to make for that type of season. None. Absolutely none. So, Barnyard says, I think it's cool AJ visited, but honestly, I think we're set at the skill position, is just my opinion. I mean, Barnyard, they are going to add a quarterback. Bottom line. I don't know if it's going to be AJ Swan, but you kind of have to add one. You have to have some depth. You got to have some competition. Coach Ford says fire him in 2025. Coach Ford's ready to fire Beamer today. He said that's why we can't extend contracts this year or next, short of 7 record 2024. 7 record. Like winning 7 or more games, is that what you're saying? Let's see. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. Texter says, meant to tell you also that if our men's basketball team keeps playing as well as they have, I would be shocked if we didn't make the NIT. Let Lamont Paris cook. That comes from Robbie Davis, friend of the show. Guys, let me ask you this. What do you do when your team's not in a bowl game? Again, it's really tough. Really, really tough. There's not a whole lot going on. Thankfully, I'm not someone that only wants to talk South Carolina. We are talking all things bowl season, SEC bowl season. Barnyard. He says, any word on the NCAA making any changes to NIL or transfer portal? There is nothing, Barnyard. There is nothing. No. Nothing new, at least. Juice's NIL has entered the chat. Juice's NIL. What's going on, man? Great to see you, Juice's NIL. Great to see you. Let's see. KCB says 5-7 next year is tougher than 5-7 this year. Guys, tomorrow night we get the 2024 schedule. I'm really excited. I am really excited to see what that schedule is going to look like. I mean, guys, admittedly, I think 5-7 puts Shane Beamer squarely on the hot seat. I think 5-7. I think 5-7 next year will put Shane Beamer on the hot seat. I think he'll be back in 2025. I think his seat will be scorching. I think his seat will absolutely be scorching if that happens. Again, 4-8 or what? And I mean, Coach Ford, to your point, there are 4 gimmies on the schedule for South Carolina next year. There are 3 cupcakes in the non-con, and there's Vandy, who you should beat. So, I mean, really 5-7 should not be good enough. And, guys, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. This is not me coming for Shane Beamer's job in any way. I'm not doing that. I think Shane Beamer is a great fit for South Carolina. But at a school with higher expectations and higher standards, 5-7 next year or worse would get Shane Beamer fired. Most coaches just do not survive back-to-back seasons of not making a bowl game. I just, bottom line. Again, I'm not saying that's what should happen, but that's why I say Beamer's seat is warm. I think there's significant pressure to get the thing turned around and get back to a bowl game. I mean, there's just no doubt. You can get away with a lot at South Carolina, but not making a bowl game is not something fans can live with. It's not something fans can live with very easily. So I just. Wow. Florida State is hosting DJ Uiagalelei for a visit this weekend, talking about the transfer portal. I mean, guys, the best teams in college football are doing it. That's what I'm saying, man, is like you want to talk about quarterback recruiting. And I mean, it's great to go get these guys, but bro, if you can go land a DJU, if you can go land a Riley Leonard, if you can go land a Kyle McCord, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I mean, Ethan K, like AJ for a solid backup and insurance option for Lenora Sellers. May the best man win the job. I mean, Ethan, that's what I said about KJ Jefferson also. Like, I don't get the people that are so turned off by that, because here's the thing. If you think if Lenora Sellers is as good as you think he is, he'll win the job. That's it. You bring in a guy like KJ, you bring in a guy like AJ Swan, you bring in whoever you bring in from the portal. If the guy is good enough, he'll beat out somebody else. That's it. Best man wins. Best man wins. And if you're a fan of South Carolina, you shouldn't be attached to any one guy starting anyways. Guys, the portal era. Don't get attached to any of these dudes. They can up and leave at any moment. May the best man win the job. Go get the best available. That's it. Go get the best available. Very simple. Very, very, very simple. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. It's 843-790-3377. I think what's interesting, though, with the portal, guys, is our guys really transferring to sit the bench? I mean, it's So the AJ Swan thing, like, I just wonder, it's going to be tough to sell that bag of goods. Hey, come sit behind a freshman. But he's not like most freshmen, I guess you could say. Barnyard, I think it'll be a domino effect for both Beamer and Tanner if the program doesn't make a 180. What does a 180 look like, Barnyard? Getting to 6 wins? 7 wins? What does that look like? Coach Ford says 6-6 is not good enough. 7-5 is winning the gimmies in 37% of the remaining 8. Okay. KCB, do you think the $1 million match is helping at all in the portal? I mean, I think it's helping more than it's hurting, Casey. I would imagine. It's all about NIL. It's all about NIL. It is all about NIL. Coach Ford, good question, Chris. Why are the other 16 leaving? And now it's 16. I thought it was 13 were leaving. 16 total. A lot of guys are leaving for playing time. Indeed. They're leaving for playing time. Jeff Gullidge, if you land AJ, does that help South Carolina landing both receivers from Vanderbilt? I think so. Yeah, I mean, I again, it doesn't hurt. I don't think you get McGowan. I don't think you get Shepard. I think Jaden McGowan, though. I'd be surprised if he's not a Gamecock. So, guys, we're going to jump into one final break. On the other side, we'll close out the show in style here on this Tuesday, taking your questions, comments, calls, and more. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Watch your Dougie, ho. Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back. Final 10 minutes or so here on the Daily Crow, taking your questions, comments, calls, your voicemails, I should say, 843-790-3377. 798-437-3377. You know, Coach Ford going back and forth with Bruin, talking about play. Coach Ford, I feel for you. I really do, Coach Ford. I do. Because it's not like a negative way. I really genuinely, Coach Ford, have empathy for you because, and I appreciate you because you've been commenting on TDC since like 2020. I mean, it's been a long time, but man, I just hope Carolina football gives you a reason to be happy one day. I do, man. I really do. Because from what I've noticed, Coach Ford, there have not been many times I've seen you comment where you have been happy with what has happened with Carolina football. I don't even know what a happy Coach Ford would look like in regards to Carolina football. Again, I'm not saying that you're not a happy human being. I'm not saying that at all. But your sports team does not improve the quality of your life at all. At all. So I hope one day, man, South Carolina sports, South Carolina football in particular, can do something to bring happiness to your life. And Coach Ford, I wish I would have been on air during the Spurrier era. Trust me. I wish. I wish, my man. I wish. I wish. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. 790-3377. Let's see. Ruben Nation says these kids never played. They're not staying more than 2 years. They can't get past 3 deep on the roster. That's a good point by Bruin Nation. Indeed. John Rice, has Coach Ford ever sent a positive message? I'm sure he has, John. I'm sure he has, but not many. Coach Ford says Merry Christmas, John Rice. It's John with no H, Coach Ford. I will just say that. Guys, we're going to have some fun content, I think, next week. We'll probably get into like what each SEC team is asking Santa Claus for Christmas. I think that'd be a lot of fun. What each SEC team's asking Santa Claus. Texter says, who are we getting at running back? Speaking on South Carolina. I mean, I think Rocket Sanders is the one that most folks want. There's also that kid from North Texas. But Rocket, you know, I was asked yesterday about like needle movers in the portal, right? Who are the needle movers or what have you? And I think Rocket Sanders is definitely one of those. When you talk about guys that are gonna really get fans excited. I think Rocket Sanders is certainly a name that will do that. The rest of them, I don't know. I don't really know. Austin Gregory says, Swan would be a great fit for the South Carolina quarterback room. He's just what we need. Someone willing to come in and compete that has Power 5 experience, SEC experience at that. I'd agree. Absolutely 110%. Austin, you cannot, like, here's the thing. If you're South Carolina, you cannot go into the spring with only Lenoris Sellers and Dante Reno and Luke Doty, who's playing wide receiver. And you cannot go into the spring saying, yeah, we have a quarterback competition. Like, no, you don't. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot go into the spring with that being your quarterback room. You can't. You just can't do that. It would be irresponsible to do that. So it would be downright irresponsible to do that. Jeff Gullidge, my sports teams are the Gamecocks and the Detroit Lions. At some point, I think I would have just given up. That is brutal. I'm not going to lie to you. Austin Gregory says, can it just be baseball season already? Yeah, I mean, if you don't care about the other bowl games or anything outside of South Carolina, and there's some, there's some people that don't, right? They don't give a damn about any of the other teams or anything like that. I mean, this is a brutal time of year for you. It's a brutal, because even basketball, I mean, the games are that close out the month of December, against nobody, non-conference opponents. So. Ruben Nation, DeAndre Martin ended up at Charlotte. A lot of people swear he should have been starting this season. Ruben Nation, there was another guy that ended up at Charlotte. There was, I think, Max Brown coming over from Kentucky, maybe? Committed to Charlotte? No, excuse me, Max Brown from Florida. That's right. Max Brown from Florida went to Charlotte. So, hey, Charlotte picking up some dudes, though. Charlotte picking up some dudes. Austin Gregory, have you had a chance to look at the non-conference baseball schedule? Any matchups that jump out to you that you're excited to watch? Great question, Austin. I should have reacted to this. That's my bad, man. We're so wrapped up in the football stuff and everything going on with that. I did not touch on the baseball schedule coming out. Let's see. Let me get into it here. Let me pull it up. Here we go. Non-conference schedule for the Yardcocks. Miami of Ohio, Winthrop, Queens, Belmont, Gardner-Webb, Clemson, the Citadel, Davidson, Longwood, Georgia State, USC Upstate Presbyterian, Georgia Southern's a fun one. Georgia Southern is a really, really fun one. That's a good team. That's a postseason team. North Carolina and Charlotte, that's probably a game everybody dreads. Citadel, East Tennessee State, and Winthrop. Honestly, my biggest takeaway, Austin's the non-conference schedule is really easy. Like, Georgia State is an interesting game, and let's see if I can zoom into this. I don't know where you play Georgia State. I can't really tell. Anyways, though, I think it's a very manageable non-conference schedule. I mean, you got Georgia Southern, you got UNC. I mean, outside of that, man, like, you should be able to have a really nice start to the year. So, gut feeling who the weekend rotation is from John Edward, I do not know. Haven't looked enough into it, John Edward. I mean, I think Matthew Becker could play a role. I think Roman Kimball might play a role. But in regards, like, I really haven't brushed up on new guys. Again, we'll talk baseball a lot in January. But, yeah. So, anyways, guys, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Like I mentioned, guys, we'll be live tomorrow morning, 10 to noon. 10 to noon instead of noon to 2. Then Thursday, Friday, no show. We'll be on the road, hanging out with family for the Christmas season. You guys enjoy your time as well. Then next week, we'll get back after it. Really excited to break down the SEC schedules. We'll do that on Monday. We'll get ready for National Signing Day. That'll be a lot of fun. Tuesday, Wednesday. And then I would say Thursday, Friday, and next week. Those might be TBD also. I might get on the road early and go see family for Christmas and stuff like that. And again, guys, just stay tuned. I'll go ahead and be transparent with you guys right now, my live show audience. There's going to be big news dropping to the end of the month. Just want to make you aware, and it is monumental news. It's not something small. It's very, very big. When the time comes, obviously, we'll talk about it. We'll discuss it, all that good stuff. But it's something really exciting that I think you guys will be stoked about as well. But in the meantime, guys, of course, do not forget, 10 to 12 tomorrow. Be sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast at The Spurs Up Show via iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. And guys, stay tuned to social media. Content bleeding out of the eyeballs as always. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.